Life, Love, and Lipstick.
Welcome to Life, Love, and Lipstick with Leslie Stewart and Tracy Lynn. Yes, we are here for another episode, and we have a guest today. Probably one of my most favorite times of the week when we invite other people to come in on our conversation.
Yes.
Because we have been bringing up so many conversations that are really touching people, not only females, but males. And the response has been really good. And again, if anybody has any comments or would like to see a guest or be a guest on our show, please send us a message. We're on social media, Instagram, and all the platforms when it comes to our podcast. Okay, so this next guest, Leslie, you actually recommended and you found this guest, and I have to say, perfect. Not only perfect timing, but wow, so powerful and so strong. And when I was researching her, this stuck out to me. Are you ready? Okay, this was huge.
Yeah.
The biggest threat to women's success and overall wellness is relationship distress.
Yes.
Boom.
Boom.
Wow. How many times have you or myself or somebody listening or watching, life was great. You were like on this high, you're in love, you've got your family, you're doing this, you're doing that. And then all of a sudden, relationship kind of goes a little downhill.
Yeah.
And so does everything else.
Absolutely. There's an absolute downward spiral from there. And it really can. I think a lot of men or women listening to this conversation right now, can attest to this. This is, you feel like life is going really well. You've got say you're in a marriage, you got your kids and your job and everything's just kind of working. And then slam, it comes to a grinding halt because of something. Could be, it could be infidelity, which is a big one. That can literally stop you in your tracks and change everything. And as you say, you almost become dysfunctional, but you have to function in your dysfunctional world.
Yes. Or you can find yourself in a situation where maybe your career is on fire.
Yep.
You're excelling, you're hitting your goals. Life is great. But then there's the other person who may not be there or understand what your job or career is. And we have people, the jeopardizing part that comes in, the sabotage. And this is where, when she talks about happiness, our guest coming up, which I know you're going to introduce her very soon, happiness and confidence and your mental state, it is so powerful. And some people, we forget that, oh my gosh, maybe I'm feeling down, or maybe my sabotaging my career or my relationships with people isn't about me, but somebody else.
Exactly. Well, we know what it's like to be in love. I mean, we have all that familiar, that feeling of just being elated, like you're kind of, walking 2 feet off the ground, and it sets you kind of on fire. Like you are just rolling, right? And you just feel good and everything seems to be a little bit easier.
I mean, you see things differently.
You do.
You're just love. I don't know. They say love is blind, maybe, but you do. Everything's just different. Smells are different. You walk outside, you see things differently, and it's such a great feeling. But then there's that, I don't know, relationship burnout, maybe the fire's gone.
Well, stuff happens, right? And things can influence. And so, our next guest really does touch on what it's like. I know we have questions about, being okay on your own. And if you aren't okay on your own, can you still manage in a relationship? Some people say that you need to make sure you take care of yourself first before you can be in a relationship.
You can love yourself. You have to love yourself first before anybody else could love you. But we've talked about this multiple times where we understand that you have to love yourself, and how you treat yourself is how you're allowing other people to treat you. But sometimes allowing someone else to love you in a way you've not been loved before
can lift you.
It's that missing piece to self-love.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good point. Okay. You know what we're going to do on that note? We are going to introduce our next guest. Her name is Dr. Shyamala Kiru, and she's a clinically trained relationship strategist who has spent the last 2 decades helping women improve the quality of their lives, get this, by transforming their relationships. She has a master's in counseling and a doctorate in marriage and family, and is the founder of the Kiru Psychotherapy Clinic. And she's actually local to the Southern Ontario area. So, but people can access her through Zoom and clinics and that type of thing online. So everyone can get this help, Tracy.
Yeah, this is very exciting. So up next, everybody, don't go anywhere. Take a quick break and we'll be right back with our special guest. Welcome back to Life, Love, and Lipstick. And as we said at the top of the show, we have a very special guest today. And Leslie, I'm going to pass the floor to you because this is, I'm excited. I'm all ears right now.
I know. So Dr. Shyamala Kiru, Shyamala, so thank you so much for coming on our show today. We were discussing, Tracy and myself, about relationships, and with this is your specialty. But I think the big question is, we're all talking, even Hugh, our producer, we were talking about that there's this whole theory behind, you have to be strong and solid as your person, yourself, before you can be in a relationship. Now, in your opinion, what do you think? Do you think we need to be there 100% before we can be in a relationship, or can a relationship help us be 100%?
Such a good question. You're just gonna go deep right off
I
the
know,
bat
right?
here,
We're going
right? Like let's just go there.
We're
Let's
going
just go
there.
there. Okay, let's go there.
Mhm.
So listen, I think it's a both and. My answer to that is a bit of a both and. So I remember a particular, I use a lot of stories and narratives. So I remember a particular moment in my life when I was like a serial dater growing up, right? Like I was always in a relationship after relationship after relationship. And my sense of self was not strong because I felt the need to be in a relationship in order to feel validated, approval, loved, all of those sorts of things. And then I remember when I finally broke away from that pattern and I was single for, the first time in years. And I felt like my strongest, most authentic, most confident, like nothing's going to shake me self. I was like, oh, awesome. I got this. Like I can do this.
Mhm.
Got into a relationship and it all crumbled. And because I was triggered and all the attachment stuff and a lot of the things that I talk about and I teach. And so my answer to that is I think we should always be doing our own work. I think we should always be doing the deeper inner work, and that we shouldn't sort of settle for kind of surface toxic positivity or mantras. There's a lot of that out there in the space that I'm in anyway. I think we should always be really attuning to the deeper work. And I also believe that if and when we do find ourselves inside of a relationship, it is such a great container to deepen that work. Doesn't mean that our
Yes.
partner is going to solve it, right? But it's a great container and an incubator because it's going to bring up all of our stuff, right? Like those attachment fears, the attachment longings, any insecurities, like any anxieties really are
Mhm.
going to be intensified and come right up to the surface when we do find ourselves partnered. And so it's for a real opportunity to work on those pieces, right? To really continue to do the deeper work on those areas that perhaps require a little bit more attention.
Okay, well, let's talk more about those areas because I did go through your website and I started off by first saying that there was a quote on there that you have. And I felt very connected to it, very powerful. The biggest threat to a woman's success and overall wellness is relationship distress.
Mhm.
I think at some point in our life can attest to this. Like we understand this, no matter if it's with a partner or with your family or with your children. But you talk about the key areas when it comes to building great relationships, building high performance relationships. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah. So my background, you'd have heard in the intro, like I spent almost 2 decades as a psychotherapist and as a couple and family therapist. And I've now moved into sort of a more coaching intensive kind of space with female entrepreneurs, female leaders, that sort of thing. But what I discovered in my work as a therapist is that where women primarily were getting stuck over and over and over again, there were threads. Like I was seeing common threads in the lives of the women that I was working with. And in particular, I was working with a lot of really high achieving, ambitious, high performing women, CEOs, doctors, lawyers, like, media experts. Like I was working with a certain echelon within, the community that I was serving. And the common thread that I was seeing was, one, you touched on it, Tracy. It's this idea that relationship distress was actually the biggest thing getting in their way, right? And
Mhm.
then as I unpacked what that looked like from a female perspective, what I discovered was that there were three verticals along which women were getting stuck. And those verticals are their, I call it mindset because I think it's a nice sort of easy term to understand. But for me, it's really our cognitive structure, the way that we think, our perspective, how we see ourselves, how we see the world, how we, right, the labels that we put on, kind of how we move through life. The second vertical is our communication style and our communication skills. This for me is the greatest area of lack for women, right? They perhaps can show up powerfully and confidently and own their space when they're at work or in their, professional identity, but then come to their personal identity. And so many of the women that I work with are like, Shyamala, like, I don't know where she went, but she literally like exited my body when I walked in the
Yep,
door.
that's
Wow.
it. I think
Wow. Yeah. You hit a nerve right there. Okay. Oh,
yes,
sorry. Yeah,
it's
go on.
true.
Whew.
I found I can actually absolutely relate to that. So I know earlier on when I was younger in particular, super sensitive, very confident out in the world, in the workplace. But
Mhm.
yes, when I would come home in my relationship, it was like I almost turned into this little girl. I would get really upset. I would almost always tear up if there was any kind of ruffling of the feathers or confrontation, and I couldn't speak. My voice was not there.
But give us a microphone and we're like, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Hello, right? Like the adult self comes out and we're able to own the space and feel confident and competent and right,
Yeah.
like really be in our power.
Mhm.
And that was the thread, the
Mm.
vertical that I was noticing with women is like they would say to me time and time again, like I don't know where she like, but she literally exits my body as soon as I step in the door to my home, right?
Wow.
And then the final vertical that I noticed was essentially relationship management. And what I mean by that is really being able to navigate togetherness and separateness, closeness and distance. So,
Mm.
so let me say a couple things and tell me if this lands. Like, it's the idea that maybe I know how to be close. I know how to be together. I know how to be partnered, but I don't know how to be apart. Or I know how to be apart. I know how to be individual. I know how to be independent, but I don't know how to be partnered.
Mm.
And so, this idea of how do we actually be able to do both and navigate the space between both, set those boundaries, negotiate those boundaries, renegotiate those boundaries. This is another vertical, again, where I saw women struggling time and time again.
What about post-traumatic stress when it comes to relationships? I mean, you talked about, can you be partnered or can you not be partnered? Are you better off being independent and it's hard for you to love? But what if you were a lover of a
Mhm.
person, or, you loved life and something happened and then you became very independent and walls come up?
Yeah,
How do you break that down to be that lover again?
Mm.
yes, that's such a great question, right? And what you're talking about and what you're touching on is attachment theory and our attachment style, right? Just like there are communication styles, we
Mhm.
also have attachment. I call them relationship styles, just to make it a little easier to understand, right? We have relationship styles. The secure relationship style is what we all want to be moving towards. But most often, when there's trauma, when there's pain, when there's hurt, any unresolved issues from earlier relationship templates, what happens is we fall into either the anxious attachment style, the avoidant attachment style, or what we call the disorganized attachment style, which means I come close. Oh, it's too hot. I'm going to pull away.
Uh-huh.
Right? Nope. Don't like to be alone. I'm going to come close. Right. And we do this dance that's called disorganized attachment. So often what happens is we slip into one of those styles and we can get stuck there for a very long time unless and until we learn to rebuild the cognitive structure, the communication style, and then eventually the relationship management style, so that we're able to navigate our relationships with confidence and with ease, whether we are partnered, whether we are separate, and when I say togetherness and separateness, like it could be something as simple, like I work with women that are like, I don't like it when my partner like goes out for a walk or goes out for a drive. I'm sitting at home just waiting for him to come back.
Oh,
Right? Like even right, like just the physical separation can be distressing. Or I don't like too much closeness, like my part. Like it's not like it's either or. It's how do we navigate the space between ourselves and another person?
well, I guess it would be, is it difficult to work on a relationship and be better in a relationship? How could you do that without being in one? Right. So I feel like, how we're saying, like, you can do self-improvement on your own. You can do self-improvement in a relationship, but you can't really work on a relationship unless you're in one. Right.
Agreed, right? Like I think at the end of the day, for me, emotional intelligence skills. So when I talk about the three verticals, mindset, communication, relationship management, those are emotional intelligence skills. One aspect, a cornerstone of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, self-management. But the other huge aspect of emotional intelligence is relationship management, is other awareness.
Mm.
And we can only do that in relationship with others.
Now, what about the Mr. Tin Man syndrome? When you're with somebody who has no feelings, no emotions, no nothing, no matter if it's a
Mhm.
female or a male,
Yep.
and you're trying to communicate with them and you're trying to better your relationship, but it just turns out to be kind of a toxic one.
No
Mhm.
communication sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
Like you
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
can't assume
Mhm.
what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, if I could, I'm going to throw that back to you. Like, what do you think, right? Like, what happens when we know that we're showing up as our best self, when we know that we're communicating assertively, we know we're showing up with courage and integrity in that relationship, and we keep bumping up against the same thing again and again?
Well, I guess there's two different types of personalities that you either keep going because I'm not a failure.
Hmm.
I'm going to crack something. I'm going to win, and I'm going to
Hmm.
show you. I know there's something underneath all those layers, and then there's the one that just walks away.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
The
Right?
overlover, right?
Right.
The
That's exactly
maybe
it.
like you said, the one that just like I don't like it when they're not here, right?
Yes. And
Mm-hmm.
that overlover, I would say, is someone who's probably caught in anxious attachment,
Mm.
right? Someone who's anxiously attached will keep pursuing despite the fact that this person is not meeting my needs.
Yes.
Yeah.
It almost becomes like a habit in some ways,
Hmm.
right? Where
Hmm.
you're used to being around that person or that's all you know. So you just keep striving for it, even though it's not the right thing.
That's it. And it goes back to our relationship templates. I always say, the templates that we carry, the relationship templates we carry, have been downloaded to us from our upbringing. We didn't choose them. We didn't have a say in them, right? We're not even conscious of them. But if we keep if we keep moving through life with those subconscious relationship templates,
Mhm.
it's exactly, what you were saying, Leslie, right? It's like, it's a pattern. You just keep doing it again and again and again, hoping for a different result.
Yeah. I guess the fear of rejection.
Mhm.
Hmm.
We
Or
don't.
fear of being alone too,
Fear of
right?
being alone. Right. Right. And that fear of being alone is huge.
Sure
Oh,
it is.
It's huge.
it's scary too.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is
you have the
scary.
independent person that's saying, "Oh, I could be alone. I don't need a man, or I don't
Hmm.
need a relationship." But then deep down, I mean, we all need some sort of affection or
Mhm.
interaction with people. And I think that, that falls along with that isolation and isolating ourselves because we don't want to feel, we're afraid to feel, we don't want to get hurt again. I want you to talk about how your perspective on women being so afraid to say no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a few things, right? Saying no, disappointing, like it falls into the bucket of we're afraid to disappoint
Yes.
other people. We're afraid to let people down, right?
Failed another
I
relationship.
failed another relationship. So what ends up happening is, and this is, you're beginning to now see the connection between, or the intersection between the verticals that we discussed, the mindset piece and the communication skills piece.
Mhm.
So if I tell myself, or if I believe that I have to be nice, I have to always accommodate. It's my job to make others happy and comfortable and all of those. if I tell myself that that's my job, then there's no way from a cognitive perspective I'll be freed up enough to say no.
Right.
There's no way I'll be comfortable enough to do it, right? Because my perspective tells me that that's just not okay. Like my job is to people please.
Right. But I find, because that was always my issue, was I wouldn't speak up. I wouldn't speak my mind and how I truly felt. So I would internalize it, carry it, carry it, carry it. And then I would just be so upset with myself because I wasn't able to speak up. Right. And then of course the other person thinks perhaps you're okay with all of this because you really weren't, you didn't have the strength and courage. I know this is part of your thing, is to help women establish that strength and courage to speak up, speak your mind, right? Hard
Yeah,
part.
it's a big piece. And what you're describing is, you keep it in, you keep it in, you keep it in.
Mhm.
That's the passive style of communication, right?
Mhm.
And what happened, a lot of women fall into that passive style of communication or passive aggressive.
Mhm.
And we can only do that for so long before the resentment builds and it builds and it layers and it layers and it intensifies. And then what ends up happening is eventually, once we can't take it any longer, typically we'll flip over to either the aggressive or the passive aggressive style of communication.
Sure.
Wow.
Right. And I think that's sort of what you're describing there.
Yeah. Can you take us back to the part of your journey? I mean, your journey has been absolutely incredible, personally, professionally. Sides of those factors being personally and professionally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry. You cut out right when you were asking that question. Could you repeat it for me? I was like,
yes. Okay. So what was the point in your journey? I mean, your journey personally and professionally has been incredible. You've been very open about it. But what was that moment that completely changed both factors and both sides of that?
Yeah, I love that question. There's definitely, for me, I call it like my fork in the road. There was definitely a defining moment that changed the trajectory of my journey. And then that trajectory was a process, right? Like there were so many pieces once I had sort of made that choice. But for me, it was becoming a mom. So I have an 11-year-old, and I got married and I became a mom. Both of those things happened for me after about probably 5, 6, maybe, about 5 or 6 years of already practicing. So I was already licensed, specializing in the field of couple and family therapy. I was like, I know it all. I know how to do this. It's going to be like easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right? Like I'll just pull out all the textbooks and it wasn't. It was far from that. And I'm quite vocal and quite public about that. Now I had a lot of shame around that when I was experiencing it, right? Because I was like, what's going on here? Like I'm like this is what I did my doctorate in couple and family, right? I'm like, this is my area. How could I not know how to show up at home? But I didn't. I really didn't. I really struggled. And so for me, and I have a daughter, and it was, I had her when I was 32 is when I had my daughter. And it was probably that year of being off with her. I was on mat leave. I was returning to work after, 12 months of being home with her. And it was like this, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but I just remember going, holy shit, I have to go back to work in like a couple of months and I'm really struggling. I feel totally lost. Like I don't know how to talk to my husband, like, can't navigate all the stresses and pressures of motherhood. I was struggling to navigate relationships with my family of origin and in-laws, like everywhere. I was just struggling. Right. And for me, that was truly the defining moment, because I remember looking at her and I don't know if it's, I happen to have a girl, and I was like, I can't hand down the same relationship templates that I was how I talk about, like, we don't have a choice in it.
Yep.
We don't get a say in it. Like, and it's totally subconscious, right? But they're just downloaded. I was like, I can't re-download this. Right. We need a new download. We need a new blueprint for how women navigate relationships and what that feels like. And, all of those sorts of things. So that was the defining, like, she's my why, like that was the moment. And then began like the muck and the process and the, like, all the things.
Well, and that is emotional awareness right there, right? And I know in your clinics, I have attended some of your online clinics, Dr. Shyamala, and And I know that you're very open and honest about that storyline, which I think is so great to show that you can have all the education in the background and even practice, but that while you were in the relationship, you learned so much, because now you can give back so much because you literally lived through all the bumps in the road, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and it's like I almost felt like I had like the formal education, in school, and the degrees and the letters behind my name.
Mhm.
And then I got the real life education when I actually, needed to navigate. I needed to move through all these pieces. I was like, you know what I mean? And that for me, I often say I don't know that I ever fully appreciated how difficult it was to just, live with people. Like, like
Mhm.
every day, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I fully appreciated
Yeah.
before that, right? Like I treated couples, I treated family. I did all as a clinician,
Mhm.
but I don't know that I fully appreciated like how quickly and how easily a conversation could go totally sideways.
Right.
Oh boy,
Like
yes.
totally sideways. And these are like two decent human beings,
Yep.
right? Smart, capable,
Mhm.
competent, and saying all kinds of crazy things to each other.
Yeah, I love that you said, I have children too. I have a teenage daughter and a teenage son. And I love that you said you don't want to pass on
Mm.
what, and not that it was consciously, passed on or intentionally passed on to us, but when we're aware of our issues and where it stems from,
Mhm.
especially being a female, you don't
Mhm.
want to pass it on to your
Mhm.
child or to your children because, man, we have our hard days. I can only imagine what it will be like when they get to their adulthood or they're going through their relationship issues,
Yeah.
which comes to my next question, Doctor. Can you really have it all? I
Mm.
was told once I couldn't have it all. I
Mm.
couldn't have a career and a
Mhm.
family
Mhm.
and a relationship. I had to
Mhm.
pick one.
And
Mhm.
be a strong woman on your own.
Mhm.
Yes, I
Mhm.
was told you can't be a triple threat.
Mhm.
Men don't like that.
Mhm.
But I believe you can.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
listening to what you're saying, but what are your thoughts on that when we hear like you really can you have it all?
Mhm. I absolutely think we can have it all. And I think what it really comes back to is perhaps what we need to do is redefine what all looks like for us. Like what all is for you is going to be different than what all, right? Like for each and
Yeah.
every one of us, having it all, I think is so, and I've really realized that, like as a woman, but then as, you know, working with women is the quote unquote dream life or the vision for our lives. It's different for all of us, right? Like I know for me it might sound like I don't know what it sounds like, but one of the things I always wanted to do was I wanted to be able to drop my daughter off at school and pick her up without putting her in before and after care. She had,
Mhm.
I had been like, one of those, like my mom worked full time and, like had longed for her to be there after school and she wasn't, and all those sorts of things. And, when I first
Yeah.
started practicing, oh man, my schedule was so packed and she was at before care, like first kid there, picked her up after, like, and that's all I wanted. I was
Yeah.
like, I just want to drop her off
Mhm.
when the school bell rings and I want to pick her up when school is out. That was like one of my goals, right? Is like I wanted to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And I remember when I got there, like that for me was a piece of having it all. It was a
Ah,
piece of having it all, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I think we just need to pause and say, what does that actually look like for me? And what are those pieces that are priorities? What's really important to me in my professional life, in my personal life, right? And what does that, yeah, what does that look like for
It's
me?
not cookie cutter, right? I think
No.
when you think of our parents, it was
mhm.
cookie cutter.
Mhm.
Having it all was, a career, a car, be mortgage free, and put food on the table. Now we women and gentlemen have
Mhm.
more in our all, and it's okay to have more in our all.
Yeah,
It's definitely
totally.
more complex. And I think when you add in you almost feel, because of social media and access to work
Mm.
any time of the day, I think that has complicated our lives, right? When our parents were done work, whether it was at, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they come home, they weren't, they might catch up on some reading or something, but they have access to phones and computers and people expecting to hear back from them immediately. I think the stress on relationships, that puts a stress on relationships, and of course on family too, right? And as you said, Tracy and I both are same kind of life as you, like going, running in different directions, and just to be able to take your kid to work and pick them is like huge. I have a 12-year-old son. Same thing. It's that is, it's such a, it seems like a small little thing, but it means the world, and it can help you find more happiness, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And it's really, I think, pausing frequently enough to reassess.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I remember a time where my schedule was way too packed and I was like, what am I
Yeah.
doing?
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
This is not what I had signed up for.
No. No
Yeah.
time to breathe, no time to pause and think. As you say, if you're in it and you're on that treadmill, how can you possibly step off to think clearly for a moment? That's the one thing I have been grateful for during this pandemic, was I was able to step away from some of my madness in my world, work-wise, to think through what I really found important. And I think a lot of people have, right?
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest blessings that has come out of this crazy time.
Well, think of the pandemic. We've talked about this too. We have extra time with the people that we love. We have extra time in our space of seeing them more. I mean, we were at a point where we saw our work family more than our real family.
Yes.
And then we're at home. Yes. And it's like, well, how do you communicate? So we found I mean, we're going in our third state of emergency, our bazillionth lockdown. There's been a lot of relationship changes, a lot of quarantine Ds, divorces going, and cheating and this and that. And looking in the mirror has been the hardest thing, not only just with a relationship, but looking at myself through this pandemic. A lot of things have changed. So have you noticed a big difference? People come out to you to talk to you about relationships with themselves or with their partner through the last year?
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% say that this last year, one of the things that I have noticed, I think more than anything else, is it has caused any underlying issues that we were able to ignore in the past because we could distract ourselves. We were too busy. We were right here, there, and everywhere. It's caused those issues to really surface, right? Like, it could be something like emotional eating to, can't talk to my partner about anything to,
Listening to them chew.
anything, right? Like it's all surfaced, right? And I think we always have a choice. And I think we certainly have a choice right now to really think about, what am I going to do with that information? It's powerful information. I don't think we're learning anything new. I think it's always been there. I think we were just able to ignore it. But what am I going to do with it? Right? Am I going to lean into it, make changes if I need to, set boundaries if I need to, start talking about those things that maybe we've never talked about, and begin to really play with the idea of maybe I could craft the relationships that I really want.
Now, okay, so since we're kind of on this conversation, with people being around their partners more, let's shift into intimacy, because some people may have enjoyed that they had more time with their partner, and maybe some people didn't like that. They kind of felt like they needed to be more intimate, even from a physical or from an emotional standpoint. So I can imagine that would be a little stressful on people during this time.
Yeah. And what we know about, and I don't know if this answers your question, but it sort of came to me as you asked, is desire, right? Slightly different, but I think an important concept to think about when we think about, long-term relationships. Desire is something that exists when there is some separateness. Like, we need a little bit of separateness to have desire. And we don't really have that right now. So one of the things that's definitely happened is, while perhaps some couples are experiencing a greater sense of emotional intimacy, when we talk about physical, erotic, sexual intimacy, we need desire to be there. We need there to be, and we need some separateness, some distance in order for us to be able to access those feelings of desire in long-term relationships, right?
Right.
Long-term committed relationships. Yeah.
You're both in lockdown together. You're wearing your track pants. Maybe neither of you decided to shower that day. You're both kind of like a little bit removed from your work environment, how it used to be. So you're not as stimulated that way. I mean, it all kind of is part and parcel, right? Yeah.
This is it. This is it. Like these are all elements, contributors to our personal identity, right? Like when I haven't put on a pair of jeans and
right.
Yeah.
You know,
and then you're like, whoa.
And heels, like, I don't even know if my, winterized toes with all the like stuff will even fit into my heels. Like, do you know what I mean? But the back in the day, over a year ago, when I went to work and I put on my cute jeans and my little blazer and my pumps and you'd come home, right? These are all things that feed into our sense of identity, and our sense of identity feed into our ability to access desire and to feel like a sexual being.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that sort of escaped us right now is that.
Yes.
Okay. That goes into what I want to ask. What are your tips for females when it comes to maybe getting your sexy back, because we've left it in 2020 at the top of the year, and trying to spark up that flame again with your significant other? I mean, there's sex, and then there's that intimacy and desire and, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How do we feel that again?
Is the clinical term. You just that's that's it right there.
Somewhere.
But it's you know what I mean? Like it is exactly that. And I think if we know and understand that we need a little bit of this separateness in order to find the desire to come back together, we need to build some of that in. We need to build in time apart during this crazy next round of lockdowns, right? Whether that is you get in your car, you talk to a girlfriend, right? You go for a walk, sometimes for me, it's literally even just putting in my AirPods while I'm cooking or I'm just doing something else. I'm like pretending that I'm not in the same house with my same family right? Like literally just like listening to a podcast or whatever it is. But we need like an emotional, mental way to separate from one another. I think that's one aspect of it. And then we need some intentionality around how and when we get together. So you can still have date nights, right? You can still say, let's have a glass of wine once the kids go to bed, whatever it is. Now the weather is getting nicer. We can sit outside on our deck if, we have that accessible to us, but we have to be a little more intentional. And then the great question, like, how do we bring our own sexy back? Well, what makes you feel sexy? I know for me, like, I like having my hair done, right? I like throwing on some makeup, and that makes me feel good. I may not put on jeans, but I'll put on a pretty top. I'll put on the ear, right?
The push.
The business on top.
The business on top. I will keep wearing the yoga pants on the bottom. I'm cool with that. But like you've got to just identify like what is it that makes you feel sexy? What is it that makes you feel feminine? What is it that invites you to even get into that headspace of desire? Don't wait for your partner to do it. Like you do it.
You said feminine. I think that's key right there, because I can speak for myself. I have not felt very feminine lately. I mean, you can dress the part, you can put the lipstick on, but I don't feel like, there goes the sound effects again. I'm not feeling it.
Yeah.
It's not me and a significant other. It's me versus me right now.
Yeah. And what is it, right? Like, what is that? And maybe it's not like we talk hair, makeup, maybe we need to throw on the heels and see what our feet feel like inside those. But, is it movement? Is it exercise? Is it, getting outside? I know for me, like that's another bit, like I need to sweat a little bit every day.
Me too.
Like I just need my pores to sweat, like, and maybe that's it. Like maybe that's the thing that sort of feeds your self-esteem, because we know particularly for women, so much of desire, intimacy, arousal is up here.
Yeah. It's how we feel about ourselves,
totally,
right?
It doesn't even matter. The guy doesn't matter. Like the other side is like, nice bonus, right? But if you're not feeling it up here, if you're not feeling yourself up here, then you're just not going to be open to it.
You know what? So a lot of people in general have gained a little bit of that, that quarantine weight because
Mhm.
again, they're not as active, right? And they're at
Yep.
home
Yep.
eating random times, snacking all day. And
Mhm.
so if you as a female are feeling maybe a little bit thick around the middle, or you just
Mhm.
don't feel like it comes back to your point.
It
So
does.
how do you've got to maybe hop in the shower, as you say, workout. I know that's my thing, is if
Mhm.
I'm feeling strong and I'm not letting my weight get out of control, then that's my ticket right there.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I also know, yeah, as you say, like I got to do my hair, and that stuff just makes me feel feminine.
It really does make it right. And you got to identify. Maybe it's like a perfume, like I
Sure.
don't know, right? Like,
Yeah.
but whatever that thing is, or those things, right? It's often like a bunch of stuff. What are those things that actually allow you to feel better up here so that you can make the connections that you need to make?
And then it comes back to the saying no to people,
Yeah,
saying
it really
no
does.
to family that wants, 110% of you and your time. But it's that I think that go back to the fear of failing them, the fear of them, maybe someone not liking you at that moment
Mhm.
because you
Yep.
said no.
Of disappointing them, right? Like
Yeah.
literally the concept of just, oh, you're disappointed in me. I've actually let you down because I've said no. Like that is a really hard thing to do. And it's often one of the biggest factors that get in the way of us practicing self-care, right? Like,
Yeah.
because everything we're talking about here is really self-care, right? Like whether it's going
Mhm.
for a walk or exercising or, taking the time to do our hair,
Yeah.
these are all ways of honoring ourselves and saying, no, I'm worth it. I'm worth this time that I'm taking to pour into myself, but it's going to require probably saying no.
Yeah, but
Right.
how do you
Something,
ease
someone.
into that word? Some
Mhm.
relationships that people have, if a female says no right off the bat, the
Mhm.
other person all of a sudden is going to be like, "What?" And
Mhm.
no, like they're not
Mhm.
that you're kind of catching them off guard.
Mhm.
Is there a way that you can just kind of easily get into the hard no?
Mhm, mhm. I like that. I think one of the frameworks that I use when I work with women, it's I call it CASE. It stands for context, ask, specify, embrace, and let go. And I always like to start every conversation with a very simple, concise, one or two sentences, give the context. I've noticed that I've been really stressed lately. I've kind of let myself go. I need to reprioritize exercise.
Hmm.
That's the context.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This is like you're gonna be saying the no, right? Like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
this is the context for the conversation. I need, 30 minutes at the beginning of each day just to ride my Peloton or go for a walk or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
I'm not going to be able to make breakfast for the kids on
Yeah.
these days,
Right.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess
Smart.
being
right? Could we
organized.
figure out another way to do it? Like you've said no, but you haven't even used the N word, right? Like you haven't said
Uh,
N-O.
right.
You've
Yes,
given the
smart.
context. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
But I do think it's important. Like I do think it's respectful and important to have conversations in that way.
Mhm.
I wish I could remember the title of this book. It's The Power of a Positive No. It's not a relationship book, but it just talks about, the ability to say no, but there's all sorts of different ways that we can set that. It's setting a boundary.
Right,
Wow.
because we need to learn how to say no in all areas of our lives, right?
Mhm.
Because I know that was more of a problem for me in my work life. I was just yes to this, yes to that. I'll do, and then when it comes that day, I'm like, what am I doing?
Mhm.
Right, and
Mhm.
you regret it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, so Dr. Shyamala, I know we don't have too much more time with you at this point, but you have the Kiru Psychotherapy Clinic. You do
Mhm.
one-on-ones with people, but you also have all of your different group therapy type clinics where all these pillars that you talked about so we can talk about relationship skills and building intimacy and confidence and mindset traps. How can people connect with you so that, they can be part of one of these, maybe these series, or just connect with you one-on-one?
Yeah, great question. So, yes, I do have my psychotherapy clinic. I no longer practice one-to-one care.
Okay.
As a psychotherapist, I have a team. They're awesome. They're all trained by me. They use my methodology and they deliver one-to-one psychotherapy. So, I'm always really want to be clear that that's where, my brand offers one-to-one psychotherapy. And then
Right.
I personally serve in my coaching clinic where I work only with women. So, I have a coaching program specifically for high performing women women that really want to build out the emotional intelligence skills to navigate their personal relationships. That is the focus of it. That program is called the EQ Code, stands for emotional intelligence. It's a 6-month, incubator, basically, where I work immersively and intensely with that population. And so the best way to find me, right, because that's a lot of information, is I love hanging out on Instagram. It's just a platform that I enjoy connecting with people and engaging and that sort of thing. I'm sure you'll add it all in the show notes. My handle there is Dr. Kiru. And I have a private Facebook community as well for high performing women called the EQ Lab. And that's where I do a lot of my training and my coaching and free events and things like that. And I think I've given you guys a link to a free 5-day event. And I offer that every 6 to 8 weeks. So regardless of when, you access this recording or you listen to this podcast or whatever that is, if you just click that link, we can get you registered. It's a 5-day event called the Courageous Intimacy Boot Camp. And it is all about what we just talked about. It's right. Like, how do we show up?
I did that. It was so good. I did. It was fantastic information. It's almost addictive because you can't wait for the next day to sort of grow on it. Right. And I grow with it. And I just think I think it's fantastic for people.
Did you do it last time, Leslie? We ran it. You did. So we've changed it a little bit this time around. We're incorporating more communication skills, because I noticed that was like the big question that I kept getting asked. And that's the big gap for women. Right.
Yeah. Well, you're just so great in conversation and so natural and so easy. And again, you revert back to your own experiences. So it makes people it's very approachable for people, right, to understand. So I think this really will help a lot of our viewers and listeners today. Right, Tracy?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think I'm going to definitely sign up for that program that you just mentioned about. Communication is definitely key. Thank you, Leslie, for having your friend on. And thank you, Doctor, for being a part of our sisterhood here at Life, Love, and Lipstick. Such an incredible, I want to say power hour, but I mean, this was under an hour and it was just absolutely incredible. Such great information. We are very lucky to have you on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And you have your own podcast as well. And
I do. Confessions of an Ex-Therapist. I just launched it very, very recently, and I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure that we have all your information so that people can connect with you, and we'll have you on again sometime down the road.
I'd love that.
Yes.
Thank you
again for being on Life, Love, and Lipstick. I'm Tracy Lynn, and joining me today, Leslie Stewart, as always, the beautiful host of the show. And, we're going to put all the links and everything that you need to know about everything that's happened in our show. And we are so excited to share that with you. Again, Life, Love, and Lipstick. You can follow us on all social platforms and on podcast platforms as well. And we'll have the doctor's information. Then you guys can go follow her and go sign up for her course. Thanks again, ladies. It was a pleasure.
Life, Love, and Lipstick.